He hadn't been to Africa until the real Africa, the proper Africa. I did a degree in environmental science, and I pretty much went all the way through with a master's in wildlife conservation. You've got absolutely no fighting chance against a crocodile. A decent crocodile. I had to bandage up a young man who had unfortunately lost his arm. I asked him the question of what was going through your head when he grabbed you. And he gave me an explanation I'll never forget.
All right, Andrew Ucles, thanks for joining us on the Next Gen North podcast.
It's great to be here.
How'd you spend your public holiday, mate?
Oh, geez. A bit shaky this morning. I didn't win. Actually, no, I did. I had one horse and it pulled through. But, I can't say I got up too much. But I live off that philosophy, only bet what you're prepared to lose.
Yeah, sure.
So, yeah.
So not too many.
I didn't lose too much.
Not too many winners last night. And so just for our audience's sake, the Darwin Cup was on yesterday. Yep. So did you burn the candle at both ends afterwards?
I didn't go out, no.
Okay.
I ended up, probably having a bit of an early one.
Yep.
But it was a big turnout. I think there's probably close to 10,000 people there.
Okay.
I would assume it's probably the biggest day in the territory, isn't it? When you say,
oh, look, I think it's almost a sign off of the dry season. I reckon. They sort of end with a bang.
Yeah.
And then everyone sort of like the tourist numbers start to disappear.
Dwindle.
Yeah, a little bit.
Yeah.
But it's a good day. I haven't been in the cup for a little while. Just haven't had time these days.
100%.
But so Anyway, so where are you from, Andrew? Like, what's your story, mate? Originally, are you a territory born?
No,
or are you
no.
a blow-in?
I wish I was.
Yeah.
I feel like you got so much more credibility when you're born here. Hey, no, I was originally from a place called Dapto.
Okay.
Which is south of Wollongong on the south coast of New South Wales.
Yep.
And so I started off life there, but I've been coming to and fro the territory probably the last 18 years now.
Yep.
So the first time I came up was when I was 18 years of age.
Okay.
Came up in the wet season because I just didn't know, but fell in love with the place, you know. And I think for like a lot of people who are outdoorsy, nature enthusiasts, this is a place where people end up.
So what was Dapto like in comparison to the territory? Was it sort of the place where, obviously that's your roots, but was it the place where you sort of found inspiration in nature and, like a place to explore the wilderness and that type of thing?
100%. Look, when we first moved into our new estate, I was about maybe 5 or 6 years of age, and essentially our backyard was like the frontier of the Illawarra Escarpment. Wow. Which is like a big conservation area. And essentially that just set the perfect training ground for me to go out there and do what and I was a pretty wild kid. I'd just go out there with like a bucket and go and collect like highly venomous snakes. It's just what I did. I just loved it.
Yeah.
My parents didn't. And I guess it all kind of started from there, and it's interesting because if you go there now, we've obviously still got the escarpment there, but like the development that's happened in the last 2 to 3 decades has been unbelievable, almost unrecognizable, so I feel coming to the territory, there's something about the territory which is it's isolated, it's remote, it's harsh, and you've got the space to have that sense of freedom and that sense of isolation.
Yep.
And I guess that's another huge draw card that brings people up here, and that's definitely where I found my solace.
Yeah. So is it just that urban sprawl? Is it just as, New South Wales, Victoria, those type of places have just expanded constantly?
Yep.
You're just running out of places for people like yourself to run around in the bush.
Yeah, look, you do have your nature corridors and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And, times have changed. But, I guess my adventures didn't just take place on the south coast of New South Wales. I've travelled all over Australia, and I guess I got to, I think I was 22 when I decided to go to Africa for the first time. And I just literally just boarded a plane, went straight to Kenya, went straight into like the Devil's Pit over there.
Yeah.
But absolutely loved it, fell in love with the place. And that's a whole nother level, Africa. I've always said in the Australian bush, you can walk very confident just walking forwards and just be mindful of what's in front of you. Whereas in Africa, you've got to look behind you as well.
Right.
You know what I mean? Because you're not exactly at the top of the list there.
Yeah.
But that's a thrill within itself. You know what I mean? Like, and what gets me? We've got all these introduced species of animals that came into Australia, you know what I mean? And there was only one that they trialled from Africa, I believe, and that was ostrich.
Okay.
Remember the ostrich farming? They tried that in the 90s.
I don't remember that, no. But
people invested their lives into that, and as quick as it went up, it went down.
So it was like tulip mania or something, was it? Just It's just this crazy.
Well, they thought what was going to happen is the ostrich liver is amazing quality. The meat's obviously really good. Obviously, egg production.
Yeah.
And so it ticked all the lights, right? It ticked all the boxes rather. And people invested their lives into it, you know. And I guess what they forgot to ask was there a demand for all the product? And or, you know, what other products were there which were in, you know, direct competition? Obviously, you got, you know, the battery system of chickens, and you got cattle. And so, yeah, ostrich farming never took off in Australia. And then those people, I believe, and I've got a funny story for you.
Okay.
I was actually walking the Darling River, and I bumped into an ostrich. So one of the originals, originals. So people just opened up their fences and were like, run free.
Yep.
You know, I think we've had a bit of a habit for doing that in Australia with animals. And so, yeah, there's still like very isolated pockets of ostrich out there, just roaming the South Australian desert.
So they've been able to sort of thrive in the wild, have they? Well, not thrive, but, you know, like they can sustain.
They can sustain themselves. I think they're probably on the end of that generation, you know.
Right.
But I think ecologically there needs to be something like 13 breeding pairs to sustain a population over time.
Is that for any animal, or is that for ostriches specifically?
I think for any animal. I think that's like a framework that they use. But I think, you know, it was probably the only animal that was introduced from Africa. But in hindsight, it would have been fantastic to have had some wildebeest out here and some other things. Or the Plains game could do amazing up here in the territory. And I think it's even been discussed as a potential project to bring rhinos in, you know.
Wow. So rhinos, because I understand that they're threatened, aren't they, in a lot of places? Is that the white rhino or something like that, where they were hunted for their ivory? And
yeah, almost to extinction. So, you know, I believe there's some species which have already went into the extinct category, but yeah, they'd either be classified as threatened or endangered. But there was discussions with a couple of property owners up here wanting to create what was called an insurance population. So to bring them here, they obviously don't have the type of pressures that exist over there in Africa with poaching and all that kind of stuff. And to run it as a bit of a tourism kick.
Yep.
But yeah, I think that within itself runs into some issues as well. But they know it's successful. The Australian landscape's successful for that, because you just look at Western Plains Zoo.
Yep.
You know, Dubbo Zoo, and they've had like a successful breeding program there. So it could definitely work. Look, I think there's a lot that can be done with the territory. We've got so much space here.
Yeah.
So, you know, it's always interesting to see what's going to be the next big thing. Actually, there were hippos that were brought in to Tipperary Station.
Yep.
That's right.
I've heard of those.
Yeah.
It was almost like there's a bit of a zoo going on out there, wasn't it? And
yes.
Yeah. Makes you sort of think, because, you know, I've heard about, what was it, the famous drug dealer from Colombia? What was his name?
God, I went and done his tour actually when I was there.
Anyway, everyone I think knows who we're talking about. Yes. But you know, Colombia's got this huge problem with the escaped hippos that he had. That's right. From his zoo. So let's hope that, you know, that doesn't happen.
100%.
Yeah. So
yeah, definitely.
Yeah. But anyway, like on the topic of the ostriches, like, wouldn't there be similarities to something like an emu?
100%.
So that was sort of, seems like an idea that was sort of fraught with danger from the start.
Very true. I don't know what the comparison is in the texture or the taste of the meat compared with an emu, because the emu meat, have you seen emu meat before? It's actually like a really dark, almost like a purple meat.
Yes, I have actually.
I don't know how that compares with ostrich meat, and in terms of the leather, whether emu would be softer, which I'm assuming it probably would be.
Yeah.
But then you'd think you'd draw some pretty close comparisons to our native bird here. And yeah, but anyway, it went up and down, and that was it.
Yeah, right. So I guess the comparisons to the territory, is that, you know, you say Kenya, so is that sort of savanna?
Sub-Saharan Africa.
Yeah, so is that, do you think that there could be African animals that could thrive here, which I think then provokes a question about introducing more things. So how do you sort of reconcile those two ideas? You know, because we've got wild camels running around, we've got cane toads running around, we've got all these probably things that were great ideas in theory.
Australia's been the place. Look, Australia's an ecological disaster,
right?
And it has been the place where people have done something and turn around and go, "Why the hell did we do that?"
Yeah,
that's our continent. Our continent's been used as an example, and I think as a result of that, we've become probably one of the most conservative countries in the world, you know, to do with our biosecurity and all that kind of stuff. And
so we don't do more damage, is that sort of what?
100%. You know, this island's been isolated because it is an island. We've been isolated for such a long period of time. And for the species which thrive here, you know, they've been perfectly adapted to the surroundings, you know, of their own landscape. And introducing anything into Australia has huge effects on the ecological balance of which. Look at the cane toad, for example. You know, I think that's always the stemming creature that people point to.
Yeah.
Look, I think in the views of entertainment, it'd be great to see, you know, kudu and impala and bushbuck and all that kind of stuff, you know. But in reality, no, you know, there's always going to be a consequence with introducing a species of animal out here. I don't believe elephants would do too well, and I don't believe giraffe would do too well either. And my speculation would be it's probably got something to do with the toxicity of a lot of our native plants and trees and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, that makes sense.
I would believe.
Right. Whereas the other animals like the kudu and that sort of stuff could potentially
predominantly grass, predominantly grass eaters. You know, we've got the water buffalo here. He was introduced from Asia. So if a water buffalo can survive out here, I dare say most of those other plains game could survive as well. Yeah. Even zebra would kick off. We've got wild brumbies, we've got donkeys. Yeah, zebra would do fantastic here. And look, our only predatory animal really is saltwater crocodile, or you know, when animals are in juvenile form, it would probably be that of dingo.
Yeah, right.
You know,
and are they pack hunters? So
dingoes. Yeah. I've watched them pack hunt before. Yeah.
So but they're kind of scavengers as well, aren't they? They sort of do everything.
Yeah, 100%.
So with Kenya. What was your experience there like? Because I've talked to some Aboriginal people at Ramginning who actually travelled to, I think maybe places like Botswana and other sort of areas of Africa. I think mainly those sort of savannah areas. And they actually taught the Africans about savannah burning and burn-offs and that sort of thing. So what was your experience like over there with how they sort of managed their own ecology and biology and all that sort of stuff?
Look, trying to compare Australia to Africa is incredibly difficult. And, you know, just recently I was in Africa, so I guess this would be the best kind of comparison. So I'd spent time in South Africa, Zambia and Zimbabwe, and a lot of the places which are essentially wild are what I like to call just like a big giant enclosure, because it's all fenced off, because it has to be. Because there's so many individuals out there which are trying to make profit from the illegal doings of poaching and ivory collection and all that kind of stuff. So you've got these giant spaces which are all like grid line fence with electric wire, and you've got, you know, security guards in every single corner. The entire thing, to be completely honest, in a big way, it doesn't feel wild. I know that sounds bad to say. You know, I spent time in Kruger National, and Kruger National Park is huge, it's massive. But when you see the influx of tourist vehicles and you see just, it really does take away from the experience, you know, and we don't have anything quite like that here. You know, if you look at our national parks, for example, you know, they're not fenced off, they're not boundary lined and all that kind of stuff. You know, they're proper wild places here. Imagine if Kakadu was completely fenced off and on every single corner there was a ranger with a gun walking around. Yeah. Imagine that. Imagine it just changes the feeling of something quite fast.
It seems quite impossible, doesn't it? Well, almost like I guess just in such a vast place like Australia it's so sparsely populated, the money that would be required to do something like that relative to our population seems rather vast. So I can't even imagine it.
I think the big problem too, you know, you look at the population of Africa and you look at how many places are somewhat impoverished, and look, ultimately everyone quests for one thing, and that's quality of life. Sure. Right, that's our baseline.
Yeah, you can't be angry at someone trying to sell a rhino horn to feed their family, can you? Yeah.
Well, it's how you attain that quality of life, and I guess that's where the little bit of the contentious discussion happens is it's just going off that. Is it someone that's selling ivory to feed their family, or is it someone that's in a higher up position politically, which is selling ivory so he can continue his trade with whatever? And more than likely, that's the other. Right. You know, you're talking about politicians that come in and out of Africa going to Dubai for meetings, and they're taking ivory horns with them. That's where the real demand is. That's where the real thing is. It's not, you know, the local villager that's selling some ivory. Yeah, they'll recruit them, but, you know, the people which are actually seeing this money, the people which are doing the sales, are generally the ones which are taken off in their private jets and private planes and all that kind of stuff. Right. And that's what I soon learnt when I was over there.
So is there much being done to combat that still, or is the corruption sort of too deep to do anything about in such a poor places?
Yeah. Well, look, you want to believe in the better part of man, but, you know, from my experiences in Africa, you know, much of Africa is, you know, systemic corruption. And any kind of agreement or any kind of handshake is based on collusion. It just happens. It's just the way it works over there, So, look, I think there's a lot of people doing good. My last interview was with a man who had been on the forefront of the poaching scene for 45 years, and I'd asked him the question. I was like, "What's the future of Africa?" And he just said one comment back. He goes, "Not good." He'd pretty much given up. He'd pretty much given up, and he'd quested his entire life for the protection of animals,
right?
And the spaces and wilderness areas that he put so much effort into. He was just watching the slow dismantlement and the urban sprawl, of that, and it's, it can be revealing.
Yeah, so it's the actual conservation side of things that he's concerned about, or is it sort of Africa more broadly in terms of hope for the people? What is it? Are they sort of interconnected, the two things? Like where the locals can use the biodiversity of the place and the tourism dollar to make a living. How do you sort of see it?
It was actually quite frowned upon. It's interesting because here in Australia, the Indigenous Aboriginals have the, I guess you could say, the luxury of being able to consume native animals.
Right.
You know what I mean? And they're allowed to do that. They'll go and fish for turtles or hunt the native game and all that kind of stuff.
Yep.
In Africa, the native people don't have the luxury of doing that, because if they'd done it, things would be pretty extinct pretty fast.
Right.
Quite literally. So yeah, I think in that format, it's definitely different. I think the Western influence probably had the biggest effect on Africa, because it changed the system of how those individuals lived in the wild and how they utilised those resources which were there. And not just that, they were all in like pocketed communities back in the day, and they had their own distinctive areas. And then with the Western sprawl, it just changed everything up. We had communities and central hubs, and that obviously had a huge effect on the landscape. And to do with there's a lot of Western influence in terms of people doing hunting, and we talk about carrying capacity, and you often hear this when you spend time in the States, and they've got a system in play which is based on like a tagging system where you get your tag and you go out there and you shoot a deer or whatever it might be.
Yep.
And then you take it to a check station. The ranger looks over it, and you can take your game. Australia doesn't necessarily have that. Like up here in the Northern Territory, you got like the waterfowl season sort of thing. And that's probably one of the only, the only way you can kind of compare Australia to America in that kind of format.
Like a managed
like a managed thing. But apart from that, like our native animals are protected. Like they can't be hunted. You can't go out there with a permit to shoot a bloody wombat, or even the collection of kangaroos has to be under like a very strict wildlife harvesting permit.
Right.
Yeah, it can't be any novice.
Yeah.
So, I think, look, in the future, Australia's system may change, but that's a big tourism plug for Australia as well.
Yeah.
We don't want to advocate or promote out there that we're hunting our native animals, because our native animals are a huge draw card to bring people here. So.
Yeah. So just staying on the topic of Africa just quickly, then you say that the locals can't actually, hunt sort of native game. Well,
they still do.
They still do, but it's sort of they're not supposed to or frowned upon. How do they then sustain themselves? Is it sort of modern agricultural practices that are away from those national park areas and that sort of thing? So like broadacre cropping and that sort of
100%. And look, and even with that, that's how it has its issues as well, because a lot of these places I spent time in, what they call it, Shamba, and it backs onto national parks.
Right.
So you have a lot of filtering. So a lot of those animals go into those areas and all that kind of stuff in these nature corridors, and that's where they're setting up all the traps and snares and all that kind of stuff. Right. But yeah, there'll also be, issues with like elephants. You've probably seen the footage of the elephants going into the village and all that kind of stuff. Yeah. And that's a pretty regular occurrence. But yeah, look, it's all that very old school farming practice. And look, Africa's rich in resources, it really is. It opens up a whole other topic to do exploitation. But for the places that I spent in Africa, the soils were so fertile, unbelievably fertile. So, I think retrospectively, if it's managed well, you can sustain people out there. They're as a staple, I think it's cassava. I think that was one of their big ones, and potatoes, and all like the the high starch foods and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
but yeah, look, Africa was different. You know, there might be an opportunity for me to go back again to do something for tourism over there in a country. I'm just discussing that at the moment. I did say to myself after my last experience, I wasn't going to go there again. Yeah, I went to hell and back. So long story short, I went there to catch a honey badger.
Okay.
Right, and it's one of the hardest animals on.
They're pretty aggressive, aren't they?
Yes, incredibly aggressive.
Yeah.
And I went through hell and back, and the hardest thing, and this is like a quote I said at the end of it, the hardest thing about trying to catch the hardest animal on earth had nothing to do with the animal.
Okay.
And had everything to do with the people in between.
Right. Is that government? Is that local people?
It's all of that.
It's all of that. It's all in the mix.
corruption, and it's all just exploitation and scamming. And I went through it all.
So everyone's just trying to get their palms greased.
100%.
Yeah. So how do you navigate that? Do you just have to go with the flow and pay everyone off, or is it? Do you get
if you want to go broke real fast? Yeah.
Right. Okay.
Yeah. They think you got an endless pocket over there, right?
Yeah.
So you've got to know people on the grounds, and then put your faith and trust in those people. At the end of the day, you've got to be connected.
Yeah.
And I dare say, stay away from any government officials and all that kind of stuff. And look, I know a lot of people that do filming over there for the networks, and they will always opt to go to places which are private reserves, and they stay away from the national parks because it's just they'll just stop you and your camera crew and just ask for money, or we're going to take your camera, and you'll already have the permits in play.
Doesn't matter.
They just make the rules up as they go.
Yeah.
You know, the Australian nation is based on a couple of things. It's based on honesty, trust, and transparency, and that's how we hold, our culture together.
Yep.
Africa
doesn't have that.
Is based on collusion. It's based on corruption and chaos.
Right.
As soon as you land, it's chaos.
Yep.
You know, it's just dysfunctional.
Yep.
And look, I've only spent time in 7 countries in Africa, but I feel like that's a pretty good.
I think that's a pretty good taste. Yeah.
And I think, look, most people would say, "Oh, hold on." But I went to Africa and I spent 2 weeks there and I had an amazing time. And I said, you know what you probably did? You took a flight from Sydney to Dubai. You went from Dubai out to Johannesburg. You had a private charter pick you up, took you out to the game reserve there, 5-star luxury, right? You sat out on your veranda eating grapes and drinking wine and watching giraffes down at the local, dam. And then on the way back, you stopped in a souvenir place. You got a couple of flags, you got a couple of, instruments and yada yada and this and that, and shook hands with someone, and that was your trip in Africa. You haven't been to Africa until you've had the fear for your life. You haven't been to Africa until,
the real Africa.
Oh, the real Africa, the proper Africa.
So how did you go? Did you end up did you end up catching the honey badger?
I did.
You did. So was it worth it in the end? Doesn't sound like it.
Look, on par.
Yeah. Okay.
On par.
Yeah.
Yeah. I reckon I could have done so many other things. I feel with that. So I actually got sponsored by a company called K-Bar. So it's one of the companies that I work with.
Yep.
A knife company. And when I put the proposal to them, I'm like, hey, look, I've always wanted to do this. These animals I've always wanted to quest it for. And it's actually formed part of a documentary of me going over there to film. Right. And K-Bar's a pretty big corporate, company. It's a massive company. And they must have had like this boardroom meeting. They all got around and was like, right, this Ucles guy from Australia wants to go and catch his honey badger. Should we fund him? And I was just like, yeah, let's see if it fucks him up. Like that literally would have been the conversation. Let's see what happens. So, but look, I'm always looking for a challenge, and if I find something as a challenge, I'll go and I'll attempt it. I like challenging myself. That just comes from a young age, I think.
Yeah. So, the territory.
That's a challenge.
Yeah. So what inspired the move from, New South Wales to somewhere like the harsh environment of, the open expanses, the freedom, so to speak, of the territory?
Yeah.
It's a long way from New South Wales.
Sure.
What prompts you to take on that challenge?
It's, what it is? Man, I think it's a subconscious thing. When you're flying into Darwin and it's in that last 40 minutes of that descent or whatever, and as you're flying over, you're seeing all the, the river systems and the billabongs and, all the wilderness and stuff. And then slowly you see a city in the distance, that isolated lights popping up. I think that's the draw card within itself, is you come to the realization that you are isolated out here. Although we're in the city, you know, we are so isolated from the rest of Australia. And everything south of here just is wild. You know, it really is, and it's on the doorstep. And what I don't understand is there's a lot of people that have lived in Darwin their entire lives and have never ventured into the wilderness. And it's just like, that's your backyard there. It is the last wild frontier, you know, I really believe it. You know, we've got some wild country out here, and it's one of those places where it's genuinely scary. You can get lost and you can die very fast. You know, it is a harsh and isolating climate.
So where have you lived then? Like well, let's say, where did you first arrive when you came? So you came to Darwin, but did you stay in Darwin? Have you ventured sort of that far down the Stuart Highway or, you know, beyond?
Well, I guess, look, backtracking 3 years. So I became a permanent resident up here 3 years ago. And so a man that I've worked for, so his local's been here his entire life, is Rob Venturan. Venturans. So they own the Finnish River Station. So that's where I conduct my tours out there on station. Amazing place. So I've spent time living out in station country, which is, it's a magnificent place. It really is. If you haven't seen that area before, just the floodplains and just the escarpment, it's fantastic. So between there and just living with a mate in Bayview. And still adjusting to the bloody midges.
Bagon Haven, they call it. Yeah.
I can't deal with them. Oh God, you know, I'd rather deal with mosquitoes. Oh no, not really mosquitoes. But yeah, the midges are terrible. But apparently you can develop a tolerance to it. That's what I've heard.
Is that right?
Heard this? Yes.
I haven't. Well, I would have hoped that I would have, developed that over time, but I don't think I have.
Over your lifetime here.
Yeah. No.
Well, it doesn't give me much hope. No.
Well, my uncle actually just moved to Bayview not that long ago, maybe 6 or so months ago. I was getting bitten inside the house.
They get for the fly screen there. Yeah, proper.
That hasn't happened to me before in Darwin.
Oh, jeez.
So that's how dense they are out there. So
they are dense.
Yeah, it's a nice spot, but yeah, good luck. Just take your Mozzie spray. Yeah.
I'm looking at buying a place, and it's in the next 12 months.
Okay.
And this follows on with, you know, part of the conversation of where I'm taking the business and what's my purpose here in Darwin. And I'm looking at buying a place where I can operate my business out of.
Okay.
And I've been looking at a couple of locations, not too far from Darwin, which is still very much wild, very much isolating and all that kind of stuff. And look, I believe in terms of being able to build my business, I need a place of static residency that I can build off. At the moment, I'm just, so I obviously run the tools off the station there with Rob. But yeah, look, I'm after my own place to have my own setup and own foundations and work off that platform. And that's the only way forward. And I see that.
So are you looking for something rural then? Is that what the characteristics you're looking for?
I think rural. There's a number of things that I've got to tick that box that I've got in my head of what will work. But yeah, look, a place of business, a place of lifestyle. You know, whenever you know, friends or family want to come and visit, you know, there's eco cabins that they can come and stay in. But I do want to keep my business quite exclusive, very inclusive, very personalised. I don't want to do what's called the carousel system, where you've got 40, 50, 60, 100 people come for your thing. You know what I mean? And right, guys, sit on this and do this and go around here and do that and now jump on this and do that. That's its own thing. It's if you want to go that route, fantastic. But there's a lot more pressure that gets put upon you to manage everything. Personally, I would like to keep it small groups, like a maximum. I mean, an absolute maximum of say 8 to 10.
So is that just because you can provide a personal experience?
Yes,
if you know, the more people as you scale up, does that mean you have to hire other people to do the tours? And that's not what you want. No,
look, I think having one person as an offsider, and it's more to do with like the hospitality of things, you know, or someone that's a driver and all that kind of stuff. But look, I've got mates in Defence Force, which have said, you know, and just recently have said, look, if you need someone to help out, you know, doing the teachings and all that kind of stuff. That's probably the route where I'd like to go. And look, I like using guys from Defence because we're on time for most of the, you know, we're pretty good with time management most of the time, and you know, we're well disciplined and all that kind of stuff. So that's kind of my perfect avatar of who I would employ.
Okay. Defence is interesting because you said a few things there. You said we, and then you said defence, which what that sort of sparks in my mind is someone like Les Hiddens. Is he a hero? Well, I don't want to say hero, but is he someone you sort of looked up to growing up? Because I mean, I loved the Bush Tucker Man on ABC back in the day. I loved Malcolm Douglas, these sorts of guys that were just, you know, trailblazing in the wilderness, sort of, you know.
It was such a unique concept. It really, really was. There was nothing quite like it, you know. And Les at the time was part of Norforce, which is a division there of defence. And so it made complete sense. And I think a lot of that documentary work was based around showcasing the nutritional value and edibles of Northern Australia. And it was all based on the premise that if soldiers had to retreat back into the homelands, that they had an ability to survive living off the land. So he did a lot of work with the Indigenous people and all that kind of stuff. And I thought the series was fantastic. I've also been approached by producers, because I'm also in Norforce now, to spark what would be the next thing from that, which I can see the vision of it. I really can. I think the issue is this. I think there's probably a lot of sensitivities and privacies that come into play, particularly with defence and brand protection and all that kind of stuff. They seem to be quite protective. And I think that would probably be the issue about creating any kind of content, even with network, to go out there into the great world. But I think there's so many things that we could push, in terms of, how we train our soldiers and, our relationship with land. And we've got a lot of really good Indigenous guys out there. So I think, I think it'd be amazing, really. But yeah, maybe a work in progress.
So what do you mean? Is that around making public intellectual property? Is that not wanting to, say, leak valuable information about surviving in Northern Australia, maybe to the enemy, should we be invaded? What does that look like in your mind?
I'm just trying to think of the best way to answer it. Look,
as long as you're allowed to answer it.
Look, I think just in generally speaking, I don't think in the space of giving up knowledge on the survivability of the landscape.
Okay.
It's hard, even if you know what you're doing, it's a hard landscape to live in.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's a very difficult landscape to live in, and effectively you have to work together as a group of people, and everyone's got to be good at what they do if you want to sustain yourself there. So in terms of giving out information in that regards, no, I don't think that would be the concern. I think just identity, the protection of identity and having absolute control of that. It's not to say it never will happen. I think it would. But there's such a process that has to come into play to get anything kind of greenlit. Okay. But yeah, look, I think it would be, it'd obviously be great. It'd be great to see it.
Yeah. Just staying on Norforce for a second, how important is Norforce? Would you be able to maybe just explain what Norforce is for our listeners, and then maybe just what your view is on how important Norforce is currently in the current geopolitical climate we're in? We've got trouble.
I don't think I can step too much into this because, I'm not a correspondent. I'm not a correspondent, so I can't really talk on behalf of that.
You don't have to talk on behalf. Maybe just the significance of defending Northern Australia.
It's important.
Okay, done.
That's my answer.
All right, no worries. Well, what role does Norforce play in that? Because I'm sure that's publicly known.
So remote surveillance.
Right.
So there's a lot of stuff that happens on our coastlines. I think just recently I read it in the paper. About the illegal fishing that was happening, the illegal commercial.
Yeah, we just had some Indonesian.
Well, that's right. So that's always a constant concern. And just people up to no good. There could be people trying to bring drugs into the country.
Yep.
There's always something that's happening out there. But we definitely have a layering system or a security layer system in play, and Norforce obviously plays part of that in that layering system. Yep. Look, to anyone that's out there, I think it's a great thing to be involved in. I think personally for myself, and this brings things back to Africa. Look, I've travelled around the world, and I dare say, when you've seen stuff overseas and then you come back to Australia, you kiss the soil here.
Yes,
I agree. You really do kiss the soil here, and you don't have to go that far out of Australia to see how the world operates in other places. You know? So I think, for myself, in a personal way, it means a lot to be part of something where you're protecting the best interests of, or being part of protecting the best interests of, your fellow countrymen, because I've seen
the other side.
Traveling through, in some beautiful places, but I think, and it adds a whole other level to why you do what you do.
So within the territory itself, what are the unconquered places for you? Is there anywhere that you'd like to do more exploration of specifically?
That's a good question. Yes, there is one place that comes to mind.
Okay.
100%.
Are you allowed to tell us?
Yeah, of course. I think there would be one place that I believe there would still be small species of lizards or even frogs, even small mammals that haven't yet been identified. I'd really believe this.
Okay.
And it would be in the western part of Arnhem Land for your plateau escarpment country.
Is that
if you look at it, it almost looks like a labyrinth, and it's
of rocky
just,
formations?
Yes. And it you know, to go and survey any type of landscape like that, it's expensive because it's all helicopter work and abseiling down cliffs, and it's all your cracks and crevices, and I believe there would be species which would yet not be identified because of the sheer issue with accessing that location and the isolation of those species in that microhabitat.
Yeah.
I think that would be, if someone said, where's there a species of animal that hasn't yet been identified, I'd say, that plateau country through the western part of Arnhem Land.
Right.
If you look at it on a map, you just go, that's some proper place there. And I think that's probably a place that has been least explored. I don't think there's been many people which have navigated into those deep cracks and crevices. I don't think in God knows how long.
You wouldn't be coming out, would you, a lot of the time?
Well, yeah. A lot of them would just be dead ends, quite literally. I think, obviously there's very strict permits that come into play and go into places like that, but it'd be fantastic to be part of a research team to go in. Yeah. How interesting, I feel.
And that's the top of the East Alligator, isn't it? Sort of around that area.
Yeah.
I've looked at that myself, and I thought, gee, I reckon there'd be a lot of Aboriginal art in there as well.
Yep.
In certain spots that would be totally, well, I guess sort of lost to the old culture.
Yep.
Yeah. So that'd be a fascinating place to explore.
Yeah, 100%.
So have you done any sort of formal studies to help you get a deeper understanding of nature?
Sure. Yes.
So
I did a degree in environmental science.
Okay.
And I pretty much went all the way through with a master's in wildlife conservation. Look, going down that academic route, I felt like it was just channeling me into an office, quite literally. I can't, that's not for me.
Yeah.
And look, I had a lot of friends that went on to do PhDs and, friends that went on to do vet and all that kind of stuff. And I love what they do, admire what they do. But working on grants and, just working in that computational space, mate, it's not for me. No, I've got to be outside. Yeah, I've got to be outside, moving around and doing stuff. It's just, to me, that would really detract from why I got into doing stuff with nature, which is ultimately to be with nature outside.
Yep. But you're still able to contribute from, say, a research perspective because you've got to have boots on the ground, so to speak.
100%.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. And look, I think it also adds to the credibility as well, if you've done formal education and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Look, I think, doing those kind of studies, it allows, I think the biggest thing it probably taught me was how to collect information,
right,
and how to analyse and be critical of information. I think that's probably what that degree taught me. But apart from that, I haven't really used it in a formative setting in terms of like going down like a career path. Like I do work for McArthur River Mine, but I'm in like the processing part. The hope is to merge into more so the environmental space.
Okay.
You know what I mean? So yeah,
what you can sort of make more of maybe a contribution towards
100%.
Sustainable practices and
100%,
that sort of thing.
Yeah. So I think, and that's, what I've come to figure out with the territory is you need to have a couple of irons in the fire up here.
Oh, for sure.
Because it's so transient, things are so up and down.
Yep.
And you see it with hospitality, you see it with tourism. It's here 1 minute, gone the next. And that's why, I'm in defence, I'm doing the thing with the mining, I do, the tours, and then also like TV related stuff as well. Yeah. And it kind of like, it keeps me busy, proper busy.
So is it through like the YouTubing and that sort of thing? Is that how you're best known? Because I've watched a lot of your videos over the years.
Yep.
Some of them have got 14, 15 million views. Like that is massive. Is that sort of how you're best known to people?
I guess so. Yeah, it was probably through that space. I kicked that off for about 10 years doing filming all over on YouTube. Now,
Yep.
I think where it came to in the end was, how, because I think most people, they approach us and it's already they're laughing, you know what I mean? Which is good, it's funny. But, I think that was a different era. A lot of stuff I'd done then, I'd never be able to get away with now.
Right.
You know what I mean? But when I was filming that kind of stuff, I always had a mission of like, well, how can I like open someone's insight to the natural world, or how can I change the methodology of doing something, and really inspire that train of thought to to make people wonder. And curiosity is everything in nature. And, I'd done the YouTube platform for 10 years and done some pretty outlandish and pretty wild stuff. And then I started getting approached by the commercial networks. And so that had to take another face,
Sure.
So I'm actually going back into discussion with networks at the moment.
Okay.
I really want to try and get a series up and running because I did a Netflix series and that was my own self-filmed documentaries, my escapades. It got shown it's in like Southeast Asia. It's in South America, Central America. I think it just got licensed to China. It came everywhere but Australia and the US, and those were the two markets I wanted to hit. And the reason why it didn't is let's just say it was seen as being too out there.
Is that right?
Yeah, too wild, too out.
What for our Western audiences?
Yep.
Interesting, because seeing as that's sort of where you built your brand almost.
Sure.
Yeah.
On that wow factor.
Yeah.
So now I think retrospectively it's like, well, how can I almost remodel or rebrand myself in such a way where it's like, that's what I've done, but this is the avenue where I'm heading.
Okay.
You know what I mean? So we've got some ideas on what could work there.
Yeah.
But look, trying to crack an elusive TV career, I guess what's always been, because I've worked very hard at what I've done. And when you watch people step into the industry and just get a show series or whatever, a lot of it just goes in like up and down sort of thing. I think it's when you've been around for a while, people respect it. You know what I mean? Because they know that you've been spat on.
Yep.
You've been through the hard yards. You've been through all this. So by the time you actually get there, people respect it.
Well, you've stayed true to your own.
100%.
Yep.
And I think that's an incredibly valuable point. And my advice to anyone in doing what they're doing is stay true to yourself. And, you got to go through the hell. You got to go through the hard yards. You got to go through all that kind of stuff. You really do.
Yep.
If you, and particularly to the Australian audience, because we'll look through things and just scorn people straight away.
You know what I mean? Syndrome and all that.
We are sharp and we're onto it.
Yep.
You know what I mean? We really are. Well, look at the backlash that, Robert Irwin had. We're stepping onto the red carpet with those khaki boots. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Look at the backlash that happened there because it wasn't. What's the word? He hadn't earned it yet.
Right. So he was sort of just
easy.
like off. What is it? Riding the coattails of his old man.
Yeah,
so,
which is a shame because I'm sure he's a lovely person.
Yep.
But that was never going to go down in Australian media ever.
Yeah.
There's no way. You think of the average Australian, hard worker doing 10-hour days and 12-hour days and. Look at that average person that sits back and has to watch that now on TV.
Yep.
No.
Won't cop it.
It's not going to fly.
Nah.
It's just not. In the US it would. I think the US and Australia definitely has a different way on how we support and embrace certain aspects. But Australians are very, we can be very harsh and very brutal.
Is that
it's part of our working
symptom?
culture.
Yeah, but do you think that's a sort of a symptom of being a colony of Britain? Because I find the British to be similar. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, definitely. Yeah, it was a shame seeing that. I think a true Australian can see through that and doesn't have to say anything. You know what I mean? And that's probably, I think, the old saying about Australians being well grounded, having 2 feet on the ground, is the old saying of, an Australian can walk into a bar and spot the wanker straight away.
Yep.
You know what I mean? We've just got the ability to do that, whereas other nations don't.
No, that's right. I agree. I think Americans, they definitely have a reputation around the world as being boisterous and that sort of thing. But I think you're right. They do sort of celebrate those people that are maybe willing to take a risk and maybe be a little bit different compared to our, like I said, the tall poppy syndrome we have here. We want everyone to sort of fall in line, be uniform and all sort of pull together in the same direction. So yeah,
and I think particularly for the territory, yeah, a lot of the people here, they call the old saying, to call a red wall,
right.
You know,
I haven't heard that.
Have you heard that one?
No,
Yeah,
no.
They say how it is.
Right. Okay. Interesting.
I think that's another good allure of the territory.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Well, what are some of your highlights? You know, what are your favourite experiences? I mean, there's probably too many to
all the ones
gauge.
that don't end up on the internet.
Has there been some close calls?
Yeah, there's been some proper ones.
Because I want to ask really about what's your relationship with crocodiles? You know, is there a love-hate relationship? Are you respectful?
There's a respectful relationship there. You know, ultimately they're an amazingly adapted and evolved predator, you know, which has been designed. I had a philosophy once about this. I'll try and get it out in the best way. I'll try and explain it in the best way. They're dangerous because they're a routine animal, and they can learn a routine. Okay, time doesn't matter for a crocodile the same way that time matters for most other animals. I feel, you know, a crocodile will sit in the one space and just be there for as long as he needs to be to acquire his end goal.
Yep.
Right. Problem with mammals is mammals being routine animals and following a pattern is naturally what happens is we develop this one word that catches us all off guard, and that's confidence.
Or overconfidence.
Well, yeah. So, you know, you go down to a place for, you know, a drink of water and you go there the first day and it's fine. Second day it's fine. Third, fourth, you go down there for a week and it's absolutely fine. Yep. And it just becomes a part of your natural doing, instinctive. It's just, you don't even think about it. You know, it's just what you do. That is the frequency of what he attaches to. So he understands your psychology. He's like almost allowing you to build up your confidence. You know what I mean? Because he knows it's going to work against you. And I've often said confidence brings complacency that leads to casualty. Yep. You know, and that's
3 C's.
Yes. And that's when you're dealing in what I like to call the danger arc, which is, you know, just off from the water's edge. You can approach a crocodile on the bank. Anyone can. You can have a 10-year-old child that can approach a crocodile on the bank, and just our motion forward and the way that we move, you know, our vertical positioning, a crocodile will see that and feel intimidated and go straight into the water.
Right.
Because he understands that we have the advantage on land at that space. He goes, it's when you start encroaching too close to the edge, you know, 1 meter from the edge or 1.5 meters from the edge, you go, that's his kill zone. If you're in the water, well, that's just a whole other story now, isn't it? You've got absolutely no fighting chance against a crocodile. A decent crocodile, you know, I'm talking over, you know, 3.5 meters.
Yep.
When you're in the water, you know, when you're wrestling in the water just with a friend, with a mate, you know, and you know, think what that's like. Yeah, well, imagine an animal that's just designed to do one thing, and that's hold you and swim down.
Terrifying.
Oh, 100% terrifying. Yeah. I had to bandage someone up when I did a relocation in Southeast Asia, and I had to bandage up a young man who had unfortunately lost his arm. And I asked him the question of, what was going through your head when he grabbed you? And he gave me an explanation I'll never forget. He says, it was like I was being held by a vice and I was inside of a washing machine.
Wow.
Yeah. And when you're spinning under that water, even if it's clear water, because just the spinning will bring up the silt and the sand and stuff, you'll disorientate. You cannot see anything. And it's funny because I talked to some of the guys that did the crocodile feeding, and I just said, you know, just how would you react if you get it? Oh, you know, you just roll with a crocodile and da-da-da. Yeah. I said, this sounds good. I can tell you that when your instinct kicks in, proper kicks in, you're not thinking about rolling with anything. You're thinking about getting your fucking arm out. And he knows that. Yeah. There's no rolling with anything. No. Yeah, you might be lucky to get a couple of punches on the head or try and go for the eye. I feel like that's an instinctive thing. But you ain't going to be rolling with anything.
You're going to be going wherever he takes you.
100%. Yeah. And even if you want to roll with him, no. Yeah. That's not going to happen.
Because I guess, you know, it comes down, it's a similar sort of thing to what Mike Tyson says. He says everyone's got a plan until they get punched in the face. That's true. And I think it rings true for crocodiles as well.
Oh,
you know, if you ever get put in the blender, you're pretty much at its mercy, aren't you?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. And look, I think at the end of the day, you know, they can talk about the croc wires and, you know, it's obviously a great program. You know, education's everything at the end of the day. when you start looking at the individuals which get bitten, it's not based on the unknowingness of knowing that there's not a crocodile there. They know there's a crocodile there, but they're just pushing the boundaries. So, whether they're wading for turtles in the billabong or whether they're retrieving a lure and they're waist deep, they're very well aware of the situation they're putting themselves into.
Yeah.
For the most part.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? There has been the odd individual that gets taken by a crocodile from cleaning a fish over the, the side of a boat.
Yeah.
That's a rarity.
That is rare.
But, that happens. But I think for the most part is people are in a place where they shouldn't be.
In their domain.
And it's an unfortunate thing because it's not, the animal's just designed to be an animal. It's designed to do his thing.
Yeah.
So, and that brings up a whole other contentious discussion about the coal and...
Well, we had Graham Webb on.
Political. Oh, I'd love to meet him.
Yeah.
I really would love to meet him at some point in time.
Can put you in touch with him if you like.
Yeah, I had talked to him on the phone once before, but yeah, I'd love to sit down and have a yarn with him. Definitely.
Brilliant man.
Yeah.
Just, an absolutely encyclopedic knowledge of crocodiles, and has a really fascinating take on things because he was there when they were almost hunted to extinction. So I actually said this on the last podcast, but he sort of regales me with the times that he's flown down the Adelaide River and there was basically not a crocodile in sight. To now, 2024, you wouldn't dip a toe in the Adelaide River, sort of thing. So it's really fascinating from that. But I'm sure he'd love to.
He did say a comment that was interesting. I'd love to talk to him about, and it was I think he said something along the lines of making the crocodiles extinct in Darwin Harbour, or something along those lines.
Really?
Yes.
As in, that's something that he wants to do?
I think so. I'd have to look into that, yeah, because there's definitely a quote that he said in an interview. Right. And I thought, interesting. He obviously knows what he's talking about because he lived it and breathed it through the decades.
Yeah.
But yeah, look, I think the topic of crocodiles is it can be a controversial discussion because along the spectrum where people sit with dealing with any kind of wildlife issue, there's a lot of emotion that comes into it, right? And all that emotion is based on where their invested interest lies, and what their narrative is. So, for example, if you're, in the zoological space, you've got this very strong conservation vibe. If you're on the other space of safari operating, hunting, you're obviously also of the notion of conservation, but from a more of a management point of view. And just depending on where you are on that seesaw, ultimately depends on what your opinion's going to be. But usually it's aligned with a dollar figure as well. Yeah.
Well, he seems like he's very much around the conservation side of things. Yep. And whenever a fatality happens and the calls for culling start ringing about, he's one that's very much seems to push back on that and say, look, we can manage these crocodiles with a conservation lens on it. So
yeah, definitely.
Anyway, we can link you guys up if you want. That's the power 100%. Of the Next Gen podcast.
Well, I think the biggest thing is what they discuss, and this is in the conservation space, is what's the ecological impact of removing crocodiles from the wild, and I think whenever you take a large predatory animal that has so much significance, what they refer to as like the trophic cascade effect.
Yep.
When you take that, what's the layering effect that's going to happen? And generally you're not going to see that in 5 years. You're going to see that over time. And so I think that's probably where the debate would happen, is we haven't collected enough information and data to know what the impacts are going to be long term.
Yep.
Right? And once again, drawing back to the Australian climate of things, of doing things and then turning back and being like, why the hell did we do that for? I've got a good example. Okay. This is a great one. This is a knee slapper. So it was a CSIRO, I believe it was in the early 90s, and they were looking at kangaroo populations I think it was in Western New South Wales, it could have been Western Queensland. And so they took an area and said, okay, we're going to go in and we're going to manage this area for a couple of months, and we're going to reduce the population of kangaroos, and then we're going to go back in there and see how the population changes over time. So they went in there and shot out, let's just say 5,000 kangaroos or whatever. And then 3 years later, they went back in there to see how it had affected the population, and they realised that the population had quadrupled. And they were like, well, what the hell is going on here? But when they looked at the kangaroos in which they were shooting, they were targeting all the larger males. And when you start looking at the social structure of kangaroos, right, in their social ways, it's actually the larger males that the smaller males from breeding.
Right.
So all of a sudden, once you start shooting off all the larger ones, it allowed the younger ones to go, well, free reign. So there's a lot of things that we can learn.
Yeah.
That's obviously like a short-term kind of thing. But yeah, the question would be is what's going to be the long-term impacts of affecting the crocodile population? And I think, Parks and Wildlife have an interesting position to be in because there's a lot of pressure upon them, and yeah.
Well, it's complicated because I think there's been examples like the kangaroo example you just gave with, sharks on reefs. Like when you kill the sharks, I think reefs tend to not do as well because it's not the apex predators sort of keeping the bottom feeders, the chain of life or whatever you call it.
Yep.
Is not kept in check. I think there was another example with the wolves of Yosemite.
I've seen how they changed the water pattern through that. It was
all that
based
sort
on
of
the
stuff,
targeted,
I think with the conservation side of things from a bureaucratic level, there's also a complication of as populations expand.
Sure.
You might have a managed area here, but then once the population of Darwin expands and hits that area,
Got ya.
how do you manage that side of things?
I get it.
Yeah.
Yeah, 100%. And I think the big one was this, when they started talking about the cull in terms of removing crocodiles, there was a good one-liner. I don't know who it was that said it, but it was the concern for the public is the false pretense that it's safe to go into the water if we're doing a cull. So let's just say, for example, they pick a river system and they go in and remove 999 crocodiles out of 1,000. Mm-hmm. We've still got one crocodile in that river system, and the last time I looked, it only took one crocodile to take someone out. Right?
Yeah.
So, yeah, I think that's another analogy that can be overlaid into it. And someone would argue this probably from yesterday's races, from betting odds. Well, I'd much rather be in that river system with one crocodile than 999 crocodiles. Right, I get and understand that, but it's more to do with the false pretense of everything will be right, it'll be safe to swim.
Well, just using that sort of analogy, if there's only one crocodile in the river system, but there's more people all of a sudden in that river system because of that false sense of security like you were talking about, then that might increase the chances of a fatal accident. So maybe that's sort of where those two ideas meet and, So bit of food for thought.
100%. Yeah, definitely. It's definitely an evolving space, crocodiles, and it's definitely the golden ticket up here in the Northern Territory. A lot of people come to the Northern Territory to see crocodiles. So that space surrounding crocodiles is interesting.
I saw a video that sort of yours that put the wind up me a little bit. Was it the Daly River? Was when you were spearing.
He almost got me.
See that really is unsettling because I fished the Daly River quite a lot just in my tinny, and I guess that prompts a question in my mind about what's a man eater? Is it sort of anything above 3.5 meters in your mind?
Anything that thinks it can take you down, I guess.
So, but is that
and they're smart too.
Yeah.
Like, he'll size you up. He's just doing a mathematical calculation. He's just looking off your body mass and figuring out whether he can take you or not.
Yeah,
you know what I mean. But yeah, generally once they hit that 3 meter mark, the cheekies I call them.
Okay.
He'll definitely test you. And a 3 meter crocodile, I think, he'll give you a good run for your money.
Yeah. But that one was, you said 4.5 at the Daly River.
He would have been close to 4.5.
Can you tell us about what happened there? Did you see him move at all? Was he moving?
I didn't see him move, but he did get into position.
Right.
Sneaky. So, and the Daly River is a perfect example. All Territorians go out to the Daly River. Beautiful place. I think it's almost it's the most idyllic river system of the Northern Territory. It's got everything to offer. It's where they do the Barrett Classic or whatever it is.
Yep.
And crystal clear waters and cascades, and it's truly amazing. The beautiful sandbars and all that kind of stuff. But it's married with a predator, right? So it's quite unfortunate. It's like this tropical island, but you've got this this beast that lurks. And the interesting thing is, a lot of those spaces is it's crystal clear water. We're talking 4 or 5 meters depth, and you can still see the bottom. And I remember I'd been, so I was very close to the crossing, and I'd been going along the edge of the river system, just going for the barramundi that sit. So the barramundi, obviously they sit in snags, but they sit under the embankments. A lot of people don't know that. They sit under the embankments because the water is still and there's a lot of snags there. It's also where you get your sooty grunters, you'll find your file snakes there, your chirrupin, all that kind of stuff. It's right up under those banks.
Right.
And I dare say 90% of Territorians or more that even go in the water would never know that because they'd never go under and search. So usually you do it with like a flashlight, like an underwater flashlight. And so I remember I was with my hand spear and I was going for the barramundi. And at that point in time where I was, it was only shallow water. I think it was only in about maybe a metre and a half of water. And generally you can, once you've done this enough, you can generally be pretty good because there might be a spot where it's relatively shallow and, you know, you can get a bit of a feel for it, get someone up on the top, keep eyes out.
Yep.
There's a bit of a sandbar that kind of blocks it and you get up underneath. But I've also found crocs in there as well. That's where the crocodiles will hide. The freshies hide in there, the salties. I've seen decent-sized salties up under those things. And the thing about it is you can be in a river system and be there for, you know, a week and be like, I haven't seen a croc, you know, here. But there's actually an air gap and an airspace under a lot of those embankments.
Right.
So a crocodile can sit up in there and be breathing. You'd never know he's there. Ever.
Yeah.
It's where a lot of the turtles hide there too. Anyway, so I remember walking along the bank and I had a hand spear. And I remember I wanted to change it out to another one. And as I was walking down the bank, there's a log that comes across and there was a big barra that was sitting on the log. And I thought to myself, isn't this like the typical kind of a lure thing? You know what I mean? Like it's just almost feels like it was set up by the crocodile, right? So I thought to myself, right, I'm going to go and see if I can get this barramundi. So I put my snorkels in. At that point in time, I've actually put my head in the water just to see where under the embankment he'd went. And so I'm doing this and I thought, all right, I'm going to come back up to the top and put my finger on. And then there was a girl I was with at the time, right? And I said to her, hey, keep your eyes sharp and just, you know, tell me if you see anything. Anyway, so I've put the spearhead on. I've walked down along the log. And as I was just about to get in, have my feet in the water, I've just kind of felt to myself, there's this a weird kind of feeling I just had.
Presence.
Like a sixth there, you could say like a presence. And I've gotten back up and I've still got my flippers on at that point in time. So you can imagine being on like a log with your flippers. You don't have the best of balance. And I've kind of just revisioned and I've looked and all of a sudden he's just been sitting there and I've just went, my heart just stopped and I thought, fuck, you would have killed me. Yeah, if I'd gotten that water, she would have been witness to it.
Jesus.
And then I remember I turned to her and I said, so, can you see anything like, you know, I should be concerned about and stuff? And she's like, no. I said, okay. I said, what about him? And then she's just went, oh, and she's like, oh my God. I'm like, yeah. So what he'd done is it was kind of like a step kind of thing.
Yep.
And he'd came into a position and then kind of just like wedged himself in sort of thing. So even tricky to pick up when you're kind of looking down. And was just waiting. And I've seen him do sneaky. I've been walking along that Daly River and I've been walking high up with the sun. And so when the sun hits the river and there's a branch, it will cast a shadow.
Yep.
And I've seen the crocodiles laying in one direction. And as soon as they've noticed me from the top, they'll go like that and they'll go boom and they'll line themselves up with a shadow.
Wow.
So they know how to use
all the tricks, yeah.
All the little tricks.
Yeah. Because it just looked like a massive log to me.
100%.
And that's, I guess, their evolution over millions and millions of years. But, mate.
Yeah, their whole design is not to look like what they are.
Yeah. To blend in with the surroundings. And, they're the perfect ambush predator, aren't they?
And you got, a 5 metre crocodile, you've only got to have a small space of it, above that water surface.
Yeah.
And it's a formidable predator.
Game over.
It really is. We've got a dinosaur here.
Yeah. Well, I reckon I've seen a 6 metre croc at Quarry Billabong.
That big black one?
I can't really remember what colour it was because I think it was on the bank and it had dried mud on it. Yeah. So it was another thing that just looked like a massive tree sort of half in the water. And I was actually untying a tangle and then I sort of looked up and we were in this tiny 3.7 metre boat and we just left the area straight away because 100%. That was a proper dinosaur, like you said.
I think I've seen him. I saw him years ago, but the one I saw was like big and it was really dark and black. And he's a proper dopper.
Every 5-10 years, I think it ends up on the front page of the NT News. That croc, 6 metre croc at Quarry Billabong. So it's always around. But anyway, getting off crocodiles and onto other sort of dangerous things like I think, have I seen videos where you've actually had things sting you, like ants and that sort of thing?
Yeah, look, I've had, so the biggest ones, I think, biologically, the biggest ones have been things I've caught from animals. So like I've had lepto, I've had dengue, I've had malaria.
Yeah, I've got a list here of, I was almost going to do like a quick fire, like how did you get like psittacosis?
Psittacosis. Okay, so psittacosis is a airborne bacteria that you get from dealing with birds, generally in like an enclosed space.
Right.
So it's quite common in the poultry industry, in the pigeon industry. They can carry psittacosis, but also like dealing with parrots, and generally in areas which are not well ventilated. And I've even heard of stories of like corporate buildings having pigeons nesting in the air conditioning units and people getting psittacosis that way.
Wow.
Right. So it causes like a lung infection.
Okay.
It can get quite serious. It's like pneumonia. I had that when I was a kid. I was about 14, 15 years of age. And it was probably from cleaning out the aviary, I dare say.
Okay.
So it's quite common with bird keepers and all that kind of stuff. And I remember reading it can be quite persistent. You can have it for long term sort of thing. So yeah, I'd got psittacosis when I was a kid.
What about Mycobacterium marinum?
That was caused by a catfish spine that went into my hand. There's a lot of bacteria on those spines. I remember I caught one in a billabong and it spined me. And if you've been done by a catfish, it feels like boiling water under the skin.
I've heard. Tell us about that pain. Yeah,
incredible amount of pain. I think the only way to kind of resolve that kind of pain is just with as much as you can tolerate hot water.
Jesus.
To dissipate that.
Yeah.
But I ended up getting an infection from that. That was long lasting. Had to treat that with, I was on antibiotics for quite some time.
Jesus.
A couple of weeks.
So it's not just the pain component, it's actually what can happen beyond 100%. That.
It's almost like a crocodile bite too. You might survive the bite, but it's the infection you've got to be concerned about.
Yeah, right. Yeah. And what about typhoid? Because I've heard about typhoid, but I thought that was sort of some...
Thailand. I was in Thailand when I got
right.
that. Yeah, so it's like typhoid, dengue, all those kind of tropical diseases and stuff.
Right.
So that can be bad. That's a whirlwind.
Is that
high temperatures, vomiting? Yeah, mosquitoes are the main vector.
Yeah. But what about melioidosis? You haven't had meliodosis before?
No, that's come up in conversation quite a bit with people up here.
Because that's quite shocking to me. You've probably had everything else, but...
Yeah. Look, touch wood, I hope I never get it. It's definitely got particular areas where it seems to spore and particular times of the year. And, there's other, there's things that increase your chances of getting that, cuts on the feet and open wounds and all that sort of thing. And it's probably more of a risk for a lot of the guys that go out there doing pig hunting, I'd feel, because they're, sludging around for that type of stuff. And, I think the indigenous people from time to time get it, because they, don't wear shoes when they're in the bush. It is rare, but I do know that once you get it, it's a very short window before it can be fatal.
Right.
Yes, and it's going to be treated very fast, like within 72 hours. But it does pop up from time to time.
Yeah. Yeah, I had a mate of mine that basically couldn't drink alcohol again after getting meliodosis.
Really?
Well, for quite a
The races will do that too.
Yeah, the what, sorry?
The races will do that
put you
too.
off for a bit, yeah, especially if you don't back any winners. Tell us about the solo trek across Arnhem Land.
Yeah, that was an interesting one.
Yeah.
So when did I kick that one off? Back in 2017 I done that. 2017, 2018.
Yeah.
Yeah, Arnhem Land represented a fear of mine. I've told many people this. When you're taking that drive all the way down to Catherine, and then Catherine and beyond, and you're looking out to all that country out there on that left-hand side, and it's all uniform and autonomous, you just really think to yourself, like, if I get lost out there, like, I'm done. That was part of the allure, is the sense of fear of being lost. That is a scary thought. I'd been told by a couple of people that it couldn't be done. And I thought to myself, I'm one of those people that when you say something like that, you better make sure it can't be done because I'm going to set myself out to do it.
Yeah.
I decided to walk it. I walked it from Numbulwar to Catherine, straight across the middle.
Wow.
And it was probably the only way it could be done, essentially, the way I navigated. I did come into problems up there with some of the escarpment country. I learnt to follow the buffalo pretty fast. The buffalo will actually create generational paths. You can actually almost see it like a fine dust moving through the escarpment of where they've just been walking. So I was following the buffalo from point A to point B. But I took a horse with me, so that horse was obviously used to carry some staple foods and water and all that kind of stuff. But, man, I lost some weight.
Yeah, you
I lost some proper weight. But in those types of situations I've discussed with people is you've got to be strategic and calculated about how you move through a space like that, landscape like that. You've also got to be a savage.
Yeah. So what are your main dangers? Is it drinking water? Is that sort of the main? No. What are the biggest risk factors there?
With any yes and no. There were places where I'd got to where I'd expected there to be water and there wasn't. And
that must have been a shock.
That was a shock and, obviously terrifying when you go 2 days without water and and you're walking at night time to try and, preserve yourself.
Sure.
Look, it depends on where you walk in Arnhem Land and obviously the time of the year. And the problem with a lot of the mapping systems, when you look at it topographically, you don't know when that picture was taken. It could have been taken in the middle of the wet. You're looking at this place where you've just put a GPS point. You're like, oh, there'll be water. Then you get there, and there hasn't been water there in months.
Must be disheartening as well.
100%.
Just takes the wind out of your sails. And
yeah, there are a number of main river systems through there. You've got that Rose River. You've got the Goiter. You've got Flying Fox. You've got Waterhouse. South of that, you've got that Roper.
Yep.
So, look, there's a lot of water which is consistent, in those areas. I dare say if you were to try and walk the northern part of Central Arnhem Road, over that northern part and walk it that way, I don't think it would be possible.
Okay.
Because that escarpment country. No, you wouldn't be able to do it.
And what time of year were you doing it? Was it in the dry?
July. I set off in July.
Which is interesting because, it's obviously going to be cooler, but yeah, there's probably going to be less water points. Is that right?
That's correct. But it also works in your advantage too, because just remember, when the water pockets become somewhat secluded and smaller, that's where you're going to be finding your pigs and your buffalo and all that kind of stuff. They're less spread out. And even towards the end of the season, they really fall on some bad quality.
Yep.
Those animals. Like, there were buffalo out there, and I kid you not. I reckon I could have pushed them over with that didgeridoo there.
Right.
That's how bad quality they were.
Yep. They were struggling.
Oh, they're struggling. Well, they're a resilient species though. As soon as wet season hits, they're back up.
Yep.
But like you'd see like a female with a calf, and she would be like bones,
emaciated. Yeah.
She couldn't even run. They can't run.
Yeah.
You wouldn't believe it.
So it's easy to get a feed, but harder to find water, sort of thing.
Yeah, look. So I had contingencies along the way when I plotted it out. I had different water sources and all that kind of stuff, and then if I wasn't going to get a water source there, all those billabongs had dried up. There was like a 70-kilometre stretch to the next place, so I could like knock that out in 2 days, of walking. So, look, in any kind of situation like that, when you're mapping something out, you've got to be very strategic. But look, accidents can happen as well.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
And how do you not get disoriented at night time? Were you carrying some sort of navigational device?
So I had GPS, but not just that. Like, the beautiful thing about the constellations and the movements is going from east to west, and I followed the tail end of Scorpius as well.
Right.
And so I knew, from my transit on how I was walking, even if I had no compass bearings or whatever, just walking that away, like all your river systems are essentially coming down this way. So you're going to hit something at some point in time, and then you hit a river system, and you can always walk north of that. And walking north of that's going to take you up the Central Arnhem Road at some point in time. Which is,
I'm guessing, how the Aboriginal people would have navigated, back in the day.
They definitely had an interesting way of navigating. Yeah, that would have been. That was proper wild what they were doing, and I'm not sure how much they relied on celestial navigation. I'm sure they did. I don't know if a lot of that knowledge has been lost though.
Right.
I feel because it is that's a deep skill.
Yeah.
A real deep skill, and if you're not using it, you're not tapping into it. Well, they'll just get lost with the generations.
Yeah. Okay. Can you tell us about any future plans, what you've got going on currently with your own tour company, how that's going? Tell us about what's going on.
Well, look, I think for what I'm trying, like I discussed before, what I'm trying to achieve is something which is personalised, exclusive, inclusive, and I've also got to be careful that I don't burn myself out as well. I think that's probably one of my big concerns is being in nature. Look, I love what I do. I love teaching people. That just comes naturally with it. But I also like spending a lot of time out there by myself too.
Right. And sorry to cut you off, but you're also doing mining work.
Yep.
So you're essentially operating on a swing. Is that right?
That's correct. So 2 on, 2 off, and then so in my 2 weeks off, that's when I partition my tours into that kind of period. Yeah, I've been pretty busy all day.
So no days off, really.
This swing, I think I had 4 days off.
Okay. That's not too bad.
And then I tried to do defence work in between that as well. So I'm trying to keep as busy as possible.
Yeah.
And then, you know, if there's filming that happens, then, you know, I've got to try and, you know, partition that as well. And yeah, things can get quite saturating.
Right.
But like I said, I think for the next couple of years, I've just got to flog myself out.
Yeah.
And I know the vision of where I'd like to head and all that kind of stuff. And the great thing is I don't have any kids, you see.
Right.
So I'm only worrying about myself right now.
Good place to be.
And my resource accumulation.
Yeah.
But no, look, not married, don't have kids.
What, is there any plans in the future for that?
Oh, there
that
is.
Type of thing?
Yeah. Look, look, the dating scene's an interesting one in Darwin. You know, how do we go from talking about crocodiles to dating? And you know, yeah, of course, I'd like to find a long-term partner. But it's just trying to find that right person.
Would they have to have a
No.
love?
I know you're going. Yeah.
Okay.
So no.
Well, please finish my sentence.
Would they have to have the same, or you know, a love for nature and all that kind of stuff?
Yeah.
Look, I think there's definitely a lure
Okay.
with someone that has those same interests, but no, they don't have to be out there like, you know, stabbing pigs and bloody, you know, fishing every weekend and all that kind of stuff.
Sure.
You know? And if anything, it's probably good to find someone that's, you know, does their own kind of thing.
Balances you out a bit.
100%.
Yeah.
Yeah, I feel. But yeah, look, I think everything happens for a reason. Everything happens in time.
Sure.
And, you know, I think, yeah, when the time's right, you kind of know. I think for a guy too, I know for myself, I want to be in a position where I've already got a place, where I've got stability,
Yep.
where I've got, you know, all that kind of stuff in play before I can think about that next step.
Yep.
Because for me personally, it's too unpredictable, it's too unstable and all that kind of stuff. And I think my instinct naturally is get a place, have a platform, have a foundation, you know what your framework is, and then bring someone into that.
Yep.
That's but you just never know when someone's going to knock on the door now, do you?
No.
Hey?
Providence.
At the races.
Who knows?
At the races. No.
Well, anyway, off dating, back to the wildlife tours. So what can a prospective guest experience on one of your tours? Are you in jeeps? Are you on foot? Like, is there accommodation? How does that all?
Yep. So far, and this is obviously adapting. So far, I do day, overnight, and 3-day tours.
Okay.
The day tours, it's not enough time. You've really got to do an overnighter and a 3-day tour to actually feel like an experience. And I tried to do like an all-rounder kind of territory experience. So what that looks like is, so I do basic survival, so teaching them things like fire preparation, water procurement, there's a bit of like shelter building and all that kind of stuff, you know, how to set up types of traps. And then I fall into doing game preparation, so showing some like indigenous ways of cooking foods. I do like a kangaroo tail and hot coals and yada yada.
All right.
And then over the course of the day, I'll take him out into the bush and we'll try and find a pig. So I'll try and catch him a pig. I show him a little bit about persistent hunting. A lot of the guys love that because it's like a bit of teamwork. It's like, right, you go left, I'm going to go right. And so, yeah, if I get a pig, I dispatch it, I take the meat off it, show them what components of the meat are, you know, good for consumption, and, you know, what different parts of the organs, you know, you pull different nutritional things from. I also keep some of that meat to feed to rescue crocodiles next door. And I also use the meat to catch the bull sharks when we do the fishing charters. So with the DPI there, I do like the shark tagging, which is pretty cool. Yeah. Most people hate the prospect of catching sharks, but you know, for a lot of clients, I'm like, yeah, let's catch a shark because I'm shit house at catching barramundi. So that's like my fallback plan. Yeah, so then there's obviously, you know, going out there and doing like the fishing charter and stuff, and I throw out a couple of pots so that way, you know, we get into the mud crabs as contingency sort of thing. Look, it's an all-rounder kind of tour, and I think, you know, I've had a lot of return guests. I actually just had someone from Real Madrid, the soccer team. And,
what?
Yes. And that's
amazing.
But that's the problem is sometimes when you're getting people like celebrities or people which are, you know, of that social elite, I always ask them, do you mind if I film or take pictures? And they're like, yeah, sure. But please don't put it on the internet. And it's just like, but this is promoting my business. You know what I mean? Like, so that was a shame. I had him and his family out. They were wonderful people. Wow. And it was interesting because when I went to go pick him up there were already people taking pictures of him and yada, yada and all that kind of stuff. And already I felt this person probably just wants, to be isolated and to be alone. And he did. He wanted just that. And I thought about it, and I was just like, this is interesting. You know, I'm running my place out of a bloody swags, and it's like a circus setup. And this is an individual that's probably on about 30 or 40 million plus a year, but yet he's deciding to come and stay with me in the bush. So I think within itself, when I start thinking about how organic and raw the experience is, it definitely does have a niche to it.
Okay.
But I do want to adapt it into something other. Right. What I've learnt so far about being in the territory is how important intellectual property is, and people are always trying to steal your intellectual property.
Correct.
Yeah, I've learnt that very fast. It becomes very difficult in trusting, certain people in your industry and all that kind of stuff. So I think, people will see it when it happens.
Yeah. How do you navigate those sorts of things where you're trying to protect your own interests?
You don't say anything.
Is that simple?
That's pretty much. Yeah. You know what I mean? Because the more ideas that you give out there, and I've always, I've come up with many different ideas, but the more ideas that you give out there, people take your ideas and stuff. And I've just learned to be like, right, it's taken a long time. I've made some big mistakes, but I'm always constantly learning. I'm not going to be sanctimonious all in it right now and say, I'm of that higher moral grounding where I can, always making mistakes. But I think you've just got to have your vision, and this would be if anyone's listening today. If you've got a goal, you've got a vision, you've got your business ideas. Be persistent. It's one thing the territory teaches you. Far out, this place tries to spit you out pretty fast, doesn't it? It can be quite predatory, but you just, keep on cracking, keep being persistent, and
Well, look, the territory is a graveyard of great business ideas. So, there's the skeletons of projects that have, fallen by the wayside all over the place. So it sounds like you're doing pretty well.
It's scary.
Yeah. So you're out at Finnis. That's the home the former home of the famous sweetheart, Crocodile.
That's correct.
Do you spend any time around Sweets Lagoon, or is there any kind of lore that you're tying into the tour around Sweetheart, or is there an opportunity?
No, I haven't. Well, that's Matt's base,
right?
So Matt's out there running top end safari camp.
Yep.
On that lagoon.
Yep.
Look, I think it's a good formula. It's a great formula and has its own thing. It's been quite successful over the years. I will say this: I'm doing something different.
Okay.
I do not follow in somebody else's footsteps. If someone's walking left, I'm going to walk right on this one. Mm-hmm. And I think that's just always been, my own thing. I've got a vision of where I would like to take things. I'm still adapting that. But look, I respect anyone that's a hard worker in the Northern Territory, or anyone that believes in themselves. I think that's, naturally people should have that. They shouldn't be, envious, but they should see something and admire that and say, okay, well, if that person can do it, then I know I can do something over here.
Yeah. So with the human impact of wilderness tours, because there has to be some sort of human footprint, how do you reconcile that with, conservation values? Or is there a bigger emphasis on the good that it's going to do, that's going to come from it, from helping people to understand nature better and that sort of thing? Like, how do you reconcile that in your mind?
Yeah, 100%. Well, look, I dare say with the tours that I conduct, there'd be very little impact or footprint. If anything, I think there's a positive side that comes to going out there and actually removing a feral animal from the environment and all that kind of stuff.
Yep.
Look, I think there is so much value in being able to educate people and giving people an experience. People are more inclined to protect something if they've got a connection with it.
Yep.
And that's always been part of my philosophy. If I can bring someone out and connect them with it, and part of connecting someone with it is making them confident out there in the landscape, teaching them a skill set, it empowers that person as well. And that's something, the knowledge and power they want to pass on to someone. And so I've always believed in that kind of philosophy. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean?
Yep.
Look, I think things have to be done in a way where you're definitely promoting the right kind of information, all that kind of stuff.
Yep.
And I guess there can always be a fine line between entertainment and promoting, the right thing.
Yep.
That's always a very fine line and an obvious grey area as well.
Yeah.
But look, I think as I expand, the ideas in my space, there's going to be actually I'm not going to step into that because I'm going to give people ideas. So yeah, look, there's a way forward, and I'm going to keep you updated on how that's going.
All right.
Yeah.
Is that through your website or how do you?
It'll
how
be
do you
through the
keep
website.
it?
It'll be through social media and all that kind of stuff. And look, I haven't spent $1 on marketing and advertising my business.
Yep.
I haven't spent $1. Next year will be the first year.
Okay.
I'll be putting money into that. Up until now, I've just kept it organic, and I've just, NT Tourism, Top End Tourism, they've been great with some of their consultants and all that kind of stuff, just trying to navigate me down the right path.
Yep.
And so next year I'll be taking it a bit more seriously.
So has that been the strategy, is to gain sort of a bit of more of a grassroots following and then promote it?
And I've just been watching. I've been watching other people, just kind of sitting back and seeing, the feel of the industry and all that kind of stuff. And look, I've always been pretty conservative in that kind of way.
Yep.
And look, like I said, everything's a learning curve. Everything's a learning curve, and you just got to take one step at a time.
Yep.
Just be careful when you jump into the deep end because it might not be deep.
So is there any sort of trends or the way you think wildlife filmmaking and adventure tours are going to go in the next sort of 5-10 years?
Yes.
Are you able to tell us
Elaborate
that without giving away maybe your own IP?
Yeah. The days of Steve Irwin are over.
Okay.
That would never kick off in today's day and age.
Right. Is that because he's jumping on animals and
sure?
So that's done.
I think that's pretty much done.
Okay.
We've seen it all before, right?
Yep.
It's been done a million times.
Is that not just because? So it's just because it's been done and not because of the current
social dismay. Yes, social dismay has changed, and the way that people, our views and opinions on the welfare of animals and all that kind of stuff, which is all positive and moving forward.
Mm-hmm.
Our codes of conduct, we've seen that. Even our primary producing industries have changed a lot in the last 10 years, and that is just marrying over onto how people deal with wildlife around them.
Yep.
And I think there's almost like this holistical push, almost this zoological push now. I've just heard recently that they're trying to phase or ban out the keeping of saltwater crocodiles in the Northern Territory.
Right.
And this is nothing more than a strategic step forward by that family over there in Queensland, I think, to try and harness their reputation and image of being individuals which are associated with those animals.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's been very strategically done with a zoological framework and approach, saying the zoos have a particular ways in which they deal with these animals and yada yada and this and that. And we don't want to allow anybody else to step into this industry and have this as a demonstrational point that could take away from our legacy or
monopoly.
our vision or our monopoly. Gets deep.
Okay.
Gets deep. But yeah, look, I think things are all working in the right direction.
Okay, that's
good. I think at the end of the day, everyone finds their own connection with nature.
Yep.
You just got to, that could be passive or it could be somewhat more hands-on, I guess. One thing I do on the tours now, I've got permits for parks and wildlife, is, the handling of snakes that I find out there on tour. And that's done on the basis of collecting information for parks based on, the species that I'm coming across and obviously being able to identify the location of which and GPSing that information. That information goes into a data record system. I think it's called the NT Fauna Atlas, where they can map out the spatial distribution of species retrospectively to geographical, once again, that's obviously got a positive step in.
Yep.
Look, there are other aspects of the industry I want to jump into at some point in time, and I've got ideas based around that.
Yep.
But I think, once again, that's just incremental.
Yep. Yeah, so watch this space sort of thing.
Yeah.
Yep. So for any budding filmmakers, wilderness adventurers, guides, that sort of thing, what sort of advice would you have for your young person trying to follow in your footsteps?
It's a tough road. It's very tough.
But it's doable?
Well, I feel like I haven't made it yet, and I'm 36, and it's probably going to take me a while. I will make it.
Yep.
It's inevitable, but I've just got to keep pushing myself and keep putting myself out there, and just, it's a long process.
Yep.
And no one's going to respect you until you've done the hard yards and that long process. There's no easy way into it. You know, even if you've got your, you know, millions of followers on social media and all that kind of stuff and that quick entertainment, that doesn't correlate to respect.
Right.
I don't think.
Okay.
You know, it's a hard one. You've got to go through some proper trauma, I think. I feel, particularly for this industry. Yeah. But I would say to anyone that's listening that's in that space, if you've got a love and you've got a passion for it, pursue it.
Right.
Pursue it to the end. You know what I mean? Because we need more people like that.
All right. Well, on that note, I think we can wrap this one, Andrew, if you're happy to.
Yeah. Definitely.
Just for the audience at home, hit them with the website, you know, how they can access your tours, how they can promote your socials, all that sort of stuff. Hit them.
Where am I
that
looking
way.
Am I looking? So it's AustralianWildTours.com. You can go on there and find out all the information about the tours that I run, different programs, different itinerary. I'm also on Facebook and Instagram as well. And keep watching this space.
Awesome. Andrew Ucles, mate. Thank you so much for your time. We appreciate it. And best of luck with all the new ventures.
Definitely.
Thanks, mate.
Thanks.
Cheers. Thanks, everyone.